Smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I hear that the Egyptian book god Thoth will cast a blessing down upon you. And hi, everybody, and it's time for another edition of After the Con. Today I'm joined by Alex White and Melinda Snodgrass, and I'm sure you've heard of these two fantastic authors, and we're going to be sitting there talking for a bit. So, as we always do, we're going to get started with everybody telling what they're doing currently and, you know, whatever they feel like putting forth. So, Alex, you are at the top left of my screen, so why don't you go first?
All right, so who am I looking down on? Is this Hollywood Squares?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I got started. That's how old I am. Yeah. So I'm excited because I just finished up my space opera trilogy for Orbit, and they bought another space opera trilogy, so I guess they liked it. It's rock and roll and robots and jazz, fighting, saving the universe kind of stuff. It's wildly stylistic. Right now we're calling it Hit It. I don't know where it's going to land, but I'm excited about it. And then they also just announced that I'm writing a Deep Space Nine novel. Yeah, I know. I was like, a Trek alum. I can ask questions. So. And then doing my second Alien book comes out in February. It's another standalone.
Neato. And Miss Melinda Snodgrass.
Okay, well, I have finished a 5-book space opera series, and we're in the process of getting them available again. I'm working through sort of trying IndiePub to see how that goes. So we're getting all the books back up. I have a whole bunch of series. I have this other thing called White Fang Law, which is about a young woman lawyer working in a vampire law firm in Manhattan, and that one's starting to get up again and available. I like series. I always have. Once I fall in love with characters, I kind of want to keep spending time with them, whether I'm writing them or reading them or watching them on television. So I've got all that going, and I guess I should do a tad of show and tell because I have a wonderful artist. This is the first book in the space opera called The High Ground.
Neato.
Yeah, it's Elizabeth Leggett. She won a Hugo, and she's just fantastic, and I'm so thrilled to be working with her in a partnership, And then in my other life, I have this pilot that I wrote, and we were going to shoot it. We'll shoot in New Mexico. And then the pandemic hit. So, so we're kind of stuck. So we spent the past few months sort of putting together a big sales package with, a deck, i.e. lookbook. I had written a pilot Bible, and we did a sizzle reel. And so now we're kind of, hoping. But, with trying to keep everybody safe on set, it's really driving up the cost of shooting. So, if you've got a $3 million pilot or thing to shoot, it's now $6 million. Basically, costs are doubled. So that makes it a little challenging. And then to keep saying, I go ride my dressage horses. So that's what I do.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, and as everybody knows, I am Brian D. Anderson. I am finishing up the final book of the Goblin Chronicles sequel. I most recently had this one, A Chorus of Fire, released through Tor Books. I am, hit my screen there. I am working on the final installment of that. This series is called The Sorcerer's Song. And then after that, I got to finish off The Veil, and I got to finish off the Akiri series. So I got a lot of work to do. Anyway, that's us. So
much writing.
Now, Melinda, you say you're in New Mexico? Well,
Yeah,
have you lived there? Have you always lived there? Or
Yeah, I grew up here. I can't call myself a native because we moved here when I was 5 months old, and the real natives are like, no, 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 you don't count. But I've spent my whole life here. I mean, periodically I have to, go and raid Hollywood for money, and so, I live in LA, and so when I'm working and or trying to get shows going or whatever. But
Yeah,
this is
I'm from an area that Mobile, Alabama area. I'm not from Mobile. I live across the bay in Fairhope, which is like what if Mayberry had a love child with San Francisco. Um, and if you were 99 years old and moved here when you were 1 week old, in the Mobile Press Register, it would say, and originally from. I'm like, what is so great about being, I mean, that you would sit there and I've seen that happen where somebody was in very, very old, moved there when they were small children, and they still will say originally from New York, originally from, or even other parts of Alabama. I mean, Alex here, he lived. You lived in how long? You were born in Huntsville, right?
No, I was born in Jackson, Mississippi.
Oh my
Carved
God!
on my tombstone that I escaped.
Oh my God! Yeah. I've been to Jackson. Actually, there used to be some really good nightclubs in Jackson when I was younger.
Well, there's a lot of interesting stuff about Jackson that people just don't give it credit for, and it's all in spite of the people that make it suck.
Yeah. Well,
where do you live now, Alex? I'm curious. Where did you escape to?
Oh, I escaped to Atlanta. So that's where I was just like, I can't get out of the South, but I can get this far.
Sort of makes you sort of a Snake Plissken sort of character, didn't it?
That's right. Escape from Alabama. Man, I got out just in time too. It was like one job ended, jumped right onto the next job. Almost uninterrupted, right out before the pandemic bought a house.
I love my town, though. I mean, Fairhope has this beautiful little mom and pop bookstore. If you ever get a chance, look it up online and the pictures and stuff. It's this little. It was one of the top 10 places to retire to for years and years and years, and you don't expect what you get when you come here. It's a lot of people, they have a misconception about Alabama, like it's completely populated by this is my wife and my sister, Judy. I mean,
it's not quite like that, but just like Mississippi, the good bits are in spite of the people that live there. I'm always. Well, what we never get taught about or told about is like the other populations that live in Alabama. But I'll tell you that I moved out of my hometown in part because the militias and the QAnon started rolling around pretty openly.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and
we don't have that here.
You see Q stickers on people's dually trucks, and you're like, it's time to get out of here.
Actually, we don't have that here. Like they would never fly the Confederate battle flag over the town hall, not because they wouldn't want to, because it would be coarse and vulgar, and it would clash with the building.
Oh yeah, maybe if red didn't go with it, but other than that, those. I'm just every time somebody's like the Civil War which ended, and I'm like, did it? I'm kind of wondering here. I've lived here my whole life, and I've seen a lot of recruitment attempts.
Well, I ran into a lot of that stuff. I lived in New York for 13 years, and I ran into just as much of that kind of crap in your hometown, small, your local bars in New
They
York
think they're
as
immune
I
up
did
there,
anywhere
but no. But I'll tell you, I remember as a kid, it was just like, oh yeah, we dress up in these cool uniforms and we go play Confederates in the woods, and these fireworks all weekend and everything.
We did throw fireworks at one another. We were stupid.
Yeah, and then there was and it's just like, you mean battle reenactments? You mean lost cause indoctrination there, kiddos?
Now, I'm noticing in the background where Melinda is that where you do your writing?
Yep, this is my office. So this is, where hopefully the magic happens.
Where the magic happens, exactly. How long you been at this?
Oh God, I don't want to say because it'll tell you how old I am. No, I'm a reformed lawyer. I used to be a lawyer.
Oh.
Hated it. I mean, loved the law and hated lawyers.
Mm.
And my best friend back in the day was Victor Milan, and he encouraged me to start writing novels. And so, I kind of did it in secret, with him reading my pages, and coaching me. And then, I finally just realized I had to get out of that law office. I hated it. And,
What type of law did you practice?
well, unfortunately, my specialty in law school was constitutional law, but
Idealistic, yes.
I ended up in a corporate law firm, and it was just agony. I mean, with me pleading with our business clients, saying, really, really, we really should obey the environmental laws, and they're like, no, figure out a way to get us out of it.
Years ago, I was on a plane. I forget where I was flying to, and I was happened to be seated by a very, very nice and very drunk gentleman who worked for a fracking company, right? And
Right.
he told me the name of it. It was so many years ago, I don't remember. And he told me something really interesting. And I don't have the pull. I didn't then, still don't now, to do anything with this knowledge. He goes, really, the worst thing about fracking is that they don't is not what we take out of the ground, it's what we put back in.
Yeah.
It's like that all the sludge and all the crap, instead of disposing of it, they were putting it back into the where they were doing the fracking, because the fines were so light compared to the disposal costs that they risked. And they didn't really enforce it. They had one or two guys inspecting like thousands and thousands of sites. So the odds on, and when they did get caught, it was a drop in the bucket compared to the cleanup costs. He goes, not to say that fracking was all that wonderful. He goes, but if they didn't pour the crap back down, all the waste from the drilling and the mining, that it wouldn't be nearly as impactful. And I'm like, and then I hear people, well, we don't, we want to deregulate this. And I'm like,
It's already basically deregulated.
Right.
how much more? I've seen films of people that they turn on their faucet and then they light it on fire. Like, what the hell, man? And doesn't that send off a few red flags? I mean, I get that we need jobs, and I get the economic impacts of things. I'm not unsympathetic to that, but man, come on. There's ways to be responsible about things,
Well, and yeah, oftentimes the jobs that we get back aren't, like, it would be better spent on job retraining programs or things like that to replace that, or luring in the green industry, which is the #1 electricity producing industry in the world.
That's where everything's headed to. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
And we got to be realistic, though. We're not going to change. We're not going to take a 60-year-old coal miner and train him in green energy. But we shouldn't leave these people who have worked very hard, put their lives at risk, behind either. So we should find a way for them to live with some dignity without,
Well, UBI for starters.
Huh? Yeah. You know what? I used to think that was a really crazy idea, and then
we spend our subsidies on stupider crap for Amazon.
Well, I'm just saying that as I'm seeing, like, as soon as we get automated vehicles, I mean, my generation will never accept it. You know why? Because Terminator. That's why.
All the anti-robot sentiment.
Yeah, but no, that's coming, and it's going to take 10 million jobs away from people who drive for a living. I mean,
we have this. I mean, science fiction has had the solution. We've been talking about it for 40 years, which is basic income. I mean, everybody has a basic income, and then, so that, as you said, they can live with dignity, and we're not worried about people, living in their cars or out on the street in wealthy Western country. It's insanity. I mean, it's just, and we end up spending more money than if we would just, help people with a basic income and housing, and then they can explore, at getting a retraining or getting an education or doing whatever. I mean, it's just, you know, I feel like we're prophets crying in the wilderness, and nobody has listened to us. You know,
Well,
we've been talking about it for decades.
eventually, the technology is going to take so many jobs that we're going. I have a friend of mine. My wife's best friend, her husband. He's an engineer for R.J. Reynolds, and he explained. R.J. Reynolds actually takes very good care of their employees when some technology takes jobs away, but not all companies do. He says he has a team of engineers working around the clock to take people's jobs away. He goes, and every company in the United States has a team of people sitting there trying to figure out technology to take jobs away, and they're very good at it. You know, so there is going to come a tipping point to where people, you know, hey, I heard that they're making AIs that can do our job. That's,
I mean,
yeah.
There's nothing that's beyond automation. It's just how quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I appreciate systems that account for that. I mean, you know, the thing is, by just constantly kind of distributing the gains only to the robot owners, it's not going to go well.
No.
Right? We're gonna get totally left behind.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, it's a really difficult situation for everybody, and there's no clear one size fits all answer to it. And the more people we're talking about, the more complex the solutions become. And we're not the brightest bunch of apes in the world. Well, maybe we're the brightest bunch of apes on this planet, but that doesn't make us very bright. There are still people who believe the Earth is flat. And by the way, if you're watching this and you believe the Earth is flat, turn your computer off now and go read a book.
Oh my God! One that disagrees with you, please.
Huh?
I said, read one that disagrees with your opinion too.
Well, oh my God! How does that? Back to a little bit of science fiction, because do either one of y'all ever does what's happening today inform either one of y'all's writings?
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the middle of my second book where it was like, and in the second book, the bad guy from the first book has basically a cult that follows him. It's a political death cult, and I was like being subtle, and I was just watching it like outside, and I was like less subtle, I guess. Oh my God, they're going for, oh no, you know, and you're just like, there was nothing that was too low. And I was just like,
no conspiracy.
All right.
Crazy.
I'm just gonna cut the line here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, my space opera is all about otherness and second-class citizenship, and you know, people's fear of the other. I mean, because we just cannot seem to get past it. It's kind of terrifying. I mean, the thing I've always thought about science fiction, though, is what we give people is a safe space to look at things that are affecting them right now, but they can do it a little bit at arm's length so it doesn't feel as threatening.
Right.
If you're not talking about, you know, Latinx people or you know, blacks or whoever, if it's so, well, it's aliens, you know, and then they can go, well, maybe I should think about my attitude.
We do the same thing in fantasy with social issues. You know, it's easy to tackle bigotry when you're talking about, or racism when it's actual two different species. You know?
Yeah, the elves and whatever, dwarves.
Yeah, elves and dwarves, you know.
Living together.
No, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of fantasy authors just use that as like a shorthand, right?
You know,
you're just like,
hard
whoa, I think you're talking about somebody specific, and maybe you don't think too highly of them.
Well, people also interpret things into a book that's not there. My first series, the Goblin Chronicles, I had one side saying I was pandering to the religious folks, and another side saying that I was anti-religious. And I'm like,
well, that's how you got a good one.
And I'm like, it's actually neither one. I didn't really. If anything that crept into it that resembles that was completely unintentional, and maybe on a subconscious level I did it, but I didn't put any kind of messaging in there at the time. I was just trying to write a fun story. And but it's amazing what some people will read in that's not there. You know, I mean, Well, there's some things that are there. Like in the Sorcerer's Song, I take a big swipe at fundamentalism, but you can never go wrong screwing with the fundamentalists.
Right. Well, they're not going to be reading your fantasy novel.
I mean, they're not usually big readers. There's only one book they read anyway. So
They don't read that book.
no, do read that book. There's actually some really good characters in that book.
Oh no, I'm saying they don't.
Oh,
At least
yeah.
they don't understand it.
Now
I saw a great thing go by about fundamentalist Christians believe in talking snakes and aliens, but they think the jury is out on climate change. You know, like, yeah, can we maybe try to, you know, look at empirical evidence and reproducible experiment?
Yeah.
You know, hey.
I mean, not all, but the thing is, we get such a skewed view watching the sensationalism that you see on news. And like, there's people like my wife who has a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry. She's a Greek Orthodox and believes in evolution. She just, she doesn't in any way reject science.
Right.
And I think that
I'm friends with a bunch of rocket scientists from Huntsville. You better believe most of them are Christian.
Oh, did you know?
They're not idiots.
Did you know Nick? Oh God, what was his science fiction writer? Nick. He worked for NASA. I can't
Webb?
remember. Huh?
Webb?
Nick Webb. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with Nick.
Oh, you worked with Nick?
Yeah, he's real quiet dude.
He was in a group that online. I don't know if y'all ever heard of K-boards.
Yeah, you know, he showed me what y'all were up to at the time, and I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
That looks like a lot of work.
It used to be like guys like Michael Sullivan and Hugh Howey, some really heavy hitter. You could get some great information. Russell Blake, and then it just sort of devolved into this group of disillusioned, bitter. You know, the world didn't recognize their genius, and if anybody with any level of commercial success chimed in and spoke honestly, they got shouted down, and so we sort of through that started this other group called Hybrids Anonymous, where most of us hybrid authors, you know, a little traditional, a little indie. Melinda, you've never done any indie stuff, have you?
I haven't until now. I had, you know, I was with Tor and Bandom and Titan. I mean, I still do wild cards, you know, in traditional publishing with George. But you know, I'm kind of moving toward the indie because, you know, it's just, if you can't finish your series, you end up with a bunch of frustrated readers, and then I end up frustrated. And, you know, this way it's like, hey, I'm just going to see how this works out. I mean, it feels like we're in a real transitional period. Certainly, even in my other profession, everything's changed. I mean, we don't do 22 or 25 episodes on the air on a traditional network anymore. You know, we do 8 or 10 episodes for these streamers. And so everything's in flux, and I feel like publishing is a bit too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making the transition the other way, but mainly because I was just getting so worn out. You know, I mean, but to be relevant in indie, a lot of times you have to, the amount of production that's involved, the amount of work you got to produce is just enormous. And I did it for 9 years.
Yeah.
It was like,
I mean, there are people who
I'm only 26. No, I'm just kidding.
Remarkably well preserved. No, but there are people who are starting to see that there is a niche, I mean, a new business model in the middle, because I'm not producing these. I mean, you know, other than I'm getting to do what I want to do, which is write books and out with people, fun people like you guys. But I'm not having to sit there and figure out how to, you know, get it up on a platform. You know,
Alex, you haven't done any indie stuff, have you?
Oh no, I started out actually in podcasting.
Oh, okay.
I started out with a podcast called The Gear Heart. I had a book on Create Space for a while, you know, but I was always like, I want to be in the Barnes and Nobles on the front, like I want to be there, and then I'll think about going back to indie. But I mean, like, basically I published some stuff to get a little attention if I could, and to try and like make a finished product. But the kind of product that I was making was like, go set up a shoot at an airport with a biplane with a guy with, like, it was like the whole, kit and caboodle, because I came from like high-end production. And so I was like, my book's going to look like a real book. And then I did one of those, and I was like, I really want to focus on my writing now.
I mean, I think that's the, again, you have to, and there does seem to be a correlation between, I think it would be very tough for a brand new young writer to start out going straight indie. I mean, I, for better or worse, have a rep, I've did Trek, and, I'm known, I'm a somewhat known commodity. And I think it's easier for me to, bring along readers into a new model than it would be if I had never published anything. I mean, I just think that, figuring out how to bridge that. But, my frustration was when I was working with traditional publishers was always, well, what do you plan to do to market your book? And I'm like, I would like to write my books, thank you. I'm not a great salesperson. That isn't, my gift. That isn't my talent. And I don't want to do that. I want to write. So it became, and I feel I have dear friends still in publishing, and I feel for editors because now they don't have time to edit. They're also busy trying to convince the sales force, that they should buy the book, or then trying to tell the marketing people how to market the book, and they don't have any time for their writers. And it's just, thank God for writers groups. It feels like they're filling in for editors now.
Well, I broke into the indie world right at kind of the onset of what they kind of consider the indie revolution. Hugh Howey had broken the internet with Wool. Michael J. Sullivan had just been one of the first. Him and Dalglish went over from being indies into traditional. Michael J. Manning was just gaining his popularity. There was a bunch of them out there. The problem we had in those early days, and I released my first book in 2011, and was there was no resources. Finding cover art was just unbelievably hard. You had to search the well. I remember searching DeviantArt for something that would work.
I cleaned up on the indie people.
Oh well,
I did so many covers.
There was no formatting. There was no. If you didn't know how to, if there was something in there you didn't know how to do, finding somebody who did know how to do it was not impossible. Finding qualified editors, finding people who knew what they were doing was hard. And what sprang up because of this, my success, Michael Manning's success, and the success of other indies like me, an entire industry sprang up that to service that particular need. Now you have all companies that you can send your book over to it, they'll format it, they'll get you a cover, they do everything, and just for a few $100. And it's so many. You have editors that used to work in the Big Five. Hell, I've had covers done by what's his name? He did the Iron Druid covers. He did all my Akiri stuff and the Veil. Anyway, all he used to do is traditional. Gene Malika, and Gene. 5-6 years ago, I couldn't have gotten his phone number, let alone got him to do a cover for me. You know what I mean?
Well, that's me with Elizabeth Leggett. I mean, and I'm actually terrified that because she's doing all this work for me, that I'm going to lose her, to the publishers, because they're all going to go, wait a minute, why are we not using this fabulous
The artists nowadays, they're going both. Well, they're doing both. The guy who did the Chorus of Fire and the Bard's Blade, Felix Ortiz, he's brilliant artist. He got his start. He was doing some fan art for Nicholas Eames' King of the Wild. And
that dude. Yeah, every time he'd send something to Nick, I'd be like, "Oh my God, how do I get a fan like that guy?"
He Lindsay Hall, who's my editor over at Tor, she was over at Orbit at the time, and she was Nick's editor, and she saw that fan art then she moves over with Davy Pillai, and moved over to tour with her. And fast forward a couple years, and she has my book, and they're looking for cover art, and she remembered his art, and that's how that happened. She remembered, and so she said, "Hey, take a look at this." And I knew who he was because he had done stuff for Rob Hayes and a few other people. And I'm like, "Hey, man, the guy's fantastic." But he's still doing. He's worked for Tor, but he's also still doing his indie stuff. So I think that even the artists are going to be hybrids that way. I don't think they're going to.
I had a so I had this guy. I think the artists are building cults now. I had this guy Pete Moorbacher that I used to sit next to my buddy Sam for like a good number of years at conventions, and I watched these two kind of coming up. And I went to college with Sam, and so I just ended up kind of meeting Pete. And like right the year I was done at Dragon Moon was when I was like, "Hey, I got this guy Pete Moorbacher. He'll do a cover for $300." So like last year, I went up to him at Dragon Con and I was like, "I don't know if you remember me, but I'm the person that got bailed on by the publisher when they asked for $300 for your book cover." and he goes, "I'd maybe do it for 15,000."
Oh wow!
And I was like, "Oh, cool." But anyway, he does this thing called Angelarium where he makes up a fun angel of something. And I think it's based on I don't know. It seems like he's pulling from a lot of stuff, but he basically makes these tarot decks, and he has a huge following just selling prints of these weird angel robot things. And I'm like, "You're definitely building a cult." I have another friend who got into Norse mythology. Sam started doing Norse mythology paintings because he's like, "Well, it's open source. Anybody can make a Norse mythology painting."
Oh
and
yeah,
pagans
right?
go crazy for him. And then he just got so into it that he like hallucinated and illustrated 2 like pagan books, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm sort of getting into this." I'm like, "All right, bud.
Ever drink our own Kool-Aid.
That's right." You gotta watch out when you're an artist.
Yeah, do not drink your
Couple of covers, work for Wizards of the Coast, build a cult.
I don't think I could ever build a cult on I have such a severe case of imposter syndrome. It is just ridiculous. I'm sure at any moment that they're going to find me out. Find out I really don't know what the hell I'm doing. And that I can't write. And the fact is, I know that's not true. But intellectually, I know that's not true. But somewhere inside me, and I know I'm not the only one that suffers that. I always wondered if guys like Brandon Sanderson ever think that. Because he's
Of course
so
they
cool.
do.
Just
What you need is con artist syndrome.
yeah, right.
It's not imposter syndrome. It's like, I got away with it.
Yeah. Well,
Oh no, when I said the most terrifying, when I'm into a book or into a story script, I'm good. But that first sit down and do it, I'm like a dog trying to figure out how to lay down and be comfortable. I just keep circling my desk chair, and going, oh my God, this will be the one that proves I have no talent and I can't write. This is the one. And if I can get down that first paragraph, then I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this, okay.
Oh, good. For me, it's always middle of Act 2.
I'm actually kind of the opposite of that. I have no problem starting a story because I started out with such a vague concept. So I just bash something out until I realize there comes a point I actually need to make this into something.
When is that for you? Like, how many words is that?
Me? Usually when I'm about 10,000 words in, I start realizing that
It's a real novel.
That this is a real. Well, I don't know how it is for you guys, but I go through so many ideas that never manifest into a act.
Yeah.
Because you hear all the time, I got this idea for a book, and then somebody will tell it, and I was like, no, you don't. You have a concept.
Right.
You have a concept that might be worthy of exploration, and then you got to determine whether or not it's worthy of becoming a book. Because
you just got to be like, I guarantee you can make that suck on your first draft. Don't worry, bud.
Well, it's just some concepts just they they sound good at the time, but when you think them through, they just don't.
Oh yeah.
They don't work out. You know, I mean, once you get past that initial excitement of a new that you have a new toy, and then then you realize, oh shit, it's made of cheap plastic. You know.
Yeah, I was born to go to Hollywood though, because I had always outlined. But once I got there into a writer's room and learned how to break a story in the Hollywood way, it was like, oh, it just fine-tuned what I do. I mean, I don't start writing until I have the cards on the corkboard. You know, I mean, I outline everything. And if it doesn't, I start at the end. I figure out what is the final climactic moment of this book, and I put that down first. And if I don't know what that is, I don't even start it. Because for me, it's not going to work. I mean, and then I go and put in a teaser that I hope will make somebody want to buy the book and not a 6-pack of beer. And then I put in the end of Act 1, the end of Act 2, plot backwards. I mean, that's how we do it on scripts. And I found it works equally as well for novels. I mean, if you're doing a bug crusher, you know, like a giant fantasy, like, you know, a George
Bug crusher.
Yeah, then you probably want to do like a teaser in 5 acts. But I find most of my books lay out as a teaser in 3 acts, and it worked really well.
Well, one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard was, as far as like storytelling, came from the guys from South Park. I saw a video they did. They came into some classroom or anything, gave a short presentation. And believe it or not, I mean, I know South Park, you're like, a lot of people go, what, South Park? But what they said turned out to be very, very true when I started examining what I do, where my best work comes from, as opposed to what's criticized the most. When you're framing your scenes, if the words "and then that's probably not, this happened, so this happened. This happened, so this happened, but this happened, so this happened. As opposed to this happened, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then. And if you're putting "and then" in between every scene, you're just
writing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
it's just existential comedy.
Simple piece of advice. It was so easy to conceptualize. You didn't have to have a PhD in literature to understand what he was talking about. And I'm like, that is some of the most useful shit I've ever heard in my life. You know, and I still use it now when I'm framing out a story. If I write a scene, what's the result? What is the cause, as opposed to what happens next? You know, what was the result of this action, as opposed to did this action just run into another action, which ran into another action, which finds the reader just sort of muddled down into, can you get to the damn point? You know what I mean? Which, you know, for me, writing simplistically and getting to the point isn't a challenge skill-wise.
You know, it is so important. I mean, because when people first start to kind of conceive of, at least when I first started to conceive of stories, I was about to like project onto everybody else my own amateur days here. But when I first started to conceive of stories, I would always try and think of like, oh, well, the inciting event, right? Everybody can think of the inciting event, right? Where's the big hook that happens in the beginning? There's a meteor, hits a skyscraper, everybody's running, you know, right? Great. After that, though, it can't just be an existential downhill slide where my character went here and then they were hiding, and then they went here and they were hiding, and then they hid over here, you know, and then they were eventually chased to the climactic finale where they had to face the guy.
That's hard to avoid with quest fantasies. That's very hard to avoid.
But the thing is, it's like there needs to be some back and forth on the quest. You need to feel at some point like, oh no, we're like back 2/3 of the way now because of something bad that happened, you know, or we have the choice. We could actually just leave the quest. I always love that one where it's just like you could just walk off and no one would know.
Well, I mean,
got a decent amount of treasure right now.
I mean, I think that was the genius of the original Star Wars.
Right, Han Solo, right? You could just walk off.
I mean, I think that's the genius of the original Star Wars, how it was this 3-act play that, though there was a lot of running around and chasing, it wasn't about that. There was always a cause and effect. There was always Luke at any moment could have gotten a spaceship and ran off. There was plenty of universe to go explore.
That
Just
guy
like
went
what you
from
just
new
said.
guy to X-wing pilot in like 72 hours.
Hey, he was a bit of a Mary Sue, but so was
Lucas
Ray. But so was Ray. I mean, my God,
Skywalker.
they just with the sequels, the current sequels, they just left character development behind.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's just that I mean, and poor what's her name, Ridley.
Daisy Ridley.
Daisy Ridley. She's a fine actor, but she was given such an impossible task to give this poorly presented character life that I mean, I feel bad for her. Then you have all these characters. Then you have all these characters that they give you, they hint that they're going to do something with them, and then they don't.
Like Finn.
I mean, then you have Ridley. Okay, think about this. You have Ridley or Ray. Ray wins her first lightsaber battle against the trained Sith.
Oh, I'm not too worried about that.
Lifts a billion tons of boulders, which Baby Yoda passed out for 3 days lifting a pig monster. You know what I mean?
Well, he's not trained at all.
Well,
he's not even potty trained,
uses the Jedi mind trick, and with no train. I mean, they could have solved that so easily, though. Say maybe have her training with a Jedi who escaped, or maybe even Windu. He because apparently falling from great heights in this universe does not kill you.
Oh yeah, Maul is one
How many people have fallen from way high up and did not die? Darth Maul, the Emperor. Come on. Surely Windu could have survived, and has her meditating and training her in the Force, or at least like contacting her, give her some reason to have been able to do this, and it would have been a simple fix, but they didn't. They
didn't know what. I don't think they knew what this was about. I mean, I actually think The Last Jedi had a stronger sense of theme. I mean, one of the other things I do in addition to outlining is I don't start until I know what the book is about, what the theme of the book is. I mean, I can obviously be.
Last Jedi was all about breaking the lineage, right?
Yeah, no, I mean
the idea of lineage.
It was breaking myth. I mean, the Last Jedi was about deconstructing myth. And that was what was so powerful about it and why it worked. But the thing was, they didn't bother. And then they gave us a fetch quest in the third movie. I play video games, and I was like, this is a freaking fetch quest, which are boring in a video game, really boring in a movie. And so that was frustrating. But
it didn't seem like any of the movies were related to one another.
No, they felt absolutely, and that's because they did not have a vision for it. I mean, when I teach, depending on the age of my students, I always say theme is what is, plot is the shit that happens, but theme is why it matters. And if you don't know what the theme is, I don't care how many cool plot things you have going on, it's ultimately going to feel, sort of unfulfilling for your reader or your viewer or your player, if you're playing a video
Styrofoam.
game. Yeah, it's just like,
I think that's why The Expanse is so good. I mean, to me, that's one of the best sci-fi, interpretations of a book. Of course, but because the characters, they number one, they flesh out the characters well. The story is cohesive. It doesn't seem to shift from episode to episode as far as like the motivations and the theme, and it's just so well written. I mean, this to me, since Battlestar Galactica was one of the best sci-fi shows that has been produced.
Well, I've been in plot breaks and writers groups with both Ty and Daniel, and I know they know this 9-book series. I mean, I think their writing is brilliant. The books are brilliant, and they know the story they're trying to tell, and they're building toward. They're taking us on a journey that has meaning instead of just a series of unrelated, exciting events. I mean, the one that still makes me mad, it was Mass Effect. I play video games. I put in 150 hours playing all 3 Mass Effect games. And then they blew it in the final 15 minutes because they blew the ending. And Daniel is right. He keeps saying, you've got to stick the landing. If you don't stick the landing, I don't care how great the journey was.
That's why conclusions are so hard to write. Like,
oh my God, yes.
I'm writing four series finales.
You did this to yourself.
Well, yeah, I did.
Yeah, no, I definitely I wrote the third book in the Salvagers, and then I like turned it in to hit the deadline, and then I like rewrote half of it because I was like, no, here's the theme. Okay, here we go. Okay, these go together. These are okay, you know, like, and hey, and it got a good review, or it got lots of good reviews.
I don't know. With me, it's like, you know, every time I really like something I've written, everybody else hates it, and the opposite, and just the opposite is true. If I'm like, I don't really like this, everybody else seems to like it. I'm like, so apparently I have the worst judgment of any writer on the planet.
At least of your own stuff.
Yeah, at least of my stuff. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So, Melinda, what is the most difficult piece of writing you've ever had to do? I'm curious.
I'm trying to, you know, I try to avoid it like a plague. Every time I have to do a lot of internal dialogue or description, I'm like, run for the hills. You know, I've got to have people connecting and dialogue. So you know, I can't think of any one particular piece. It's like there are pieces of anything I do that I find to be really difficult, and things that I just flat hate. I mean, I admit when I'm reading a book and I hit pages of the waving fields of grain and the description of the tapestries and the banquet, I'm sort of flipping through going, when are they going to start talking again? You know, when are they going to start having an argument, or, you know, go to bed with each other or do something? So, yeah, I mean, I struggle with that. Like I said, I was born to be a screenwriter. I mean, there was one time I was writing a script at the same time I was working on a book, and I turned in a chapter to the writers group, and I had inadvertently written interior bedroom night in the prose. And then Walter John looked at me and he said, "This is awesome dialogue as always. Are they in a white room?" And I was like, yeah. So I have to go back and try to go, okay, what do they feel? What do they smell? What do they hear?
Oh, yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. You know, can I just have them talk?
Well, I think that what a lot of people struggle with Tolkien and some of the early that kind of writing, where, I mean, he was such a poet. He wrote such a even for the time, the style was pretty antiquated. But I love Tolkien. Don't get me wrong. I really do. But there were times when I've reread it where if I was tired when I started reading, I couldn't handle it. You know, I had to. You know, it was like trying to read Hawthorne. I mean, which is difficult, not because it's just written in such an awkward style to read. And I didn't read Hawthorne until I was older. You know, I didn't read him until I was in my 20s. And where I'd like read Shakespeare as a teenager, so as an adult I have an easier time reading. And I think if you read a certain style when you're younger, it makes it easier for you when you get older, as opposed to if you've never encountered it. Because I've heard people like try to read Tolkien, they're 20, 30 years old, and they've never read it before, and they struggle through it, where somebody who read it when they were 13, 14 years old have a much easier. I think just our brains are just, it adapt a lot easier if we read something when we're young. But yeah, all the descriptions that he put in, I love it when I'm fresh and I can really sit there and enjoy it. But man, I mean, I always read as an alternative to television or a movie or something like that for my personal pleasure. And when you're tired after a day's work, sometimes the last thing you want to do is read something that you have to slog through, and you want to. It's the difference between watching a documentary about the migration of the red ant of South America and watching, I don't know, Cheers or MASH. You know, it's funny. It's, you know, it may be mindless entertainment, but it is entertainment. And
I wouldn't call MASH mindless entertainment.
Well, the first two seasons were. First few seasons. Till Alan Alda took over and wanted Grammys. I mean, not Grammys. Yeah, Emmys.
The whatevers. Awards. The awards.
He wanted awards.
No, I mean, it's interesting. I love Tolkien, but I did read. I think I was like 10 when somebody bought me the trilogy because I was bored when we were in California, and I gobbled them down. But as now coming back to it, I'm like, this weird omniscient third person is sort of, it's very you feel very separated in some ways. Is beautiful, but on the other hand, I never really understood. Like, I always hated the scouring of the Shire. I was like, why is this boring stuff in here? Aragorn is king, and blah blah blah. And then suddenly when I'm in my 40s, I went, oh my God, this is the entire point of the whole book. Is right here. Which is why, in many ways, as great as the movies were, I felt like they missed the point, the theme of the books, because they left all that out. I mean, they hinted at it with, that Frodo can't go back, but it is something that after some life experience, you come back to Tolkien and you go, oh my God, this is actually.
Then you realize that he wrote the whole book was because he was a linguist, and he wrote the Lord of the Rings to basically he wrote a language and wrote a story so he could use his languages. Yeah. I mean, he actually, and I'm not speculating, he actually said this, and the man was unique in a lot of ways. He's not the end all be all, and I think so. I think where his critics get it wrong is that and some of his advocates get it wrong. Is that I think they're detracting and supporting for the wrong reasons. To me, it's not how brilliant a writer he was. It's what he did for the genre. It's what he did to give science fiction and fantasy and this whole imaginative genre literary gravitas, and the influences he had on later writers, Terry Brooks, George Martin. You can scarcely name a writer in any of the fantasy or science fiction genres that weren't, if they weren't influenced directly by Tolkien, they were influenced by somebody who was.
Well, and maybe you were influenced to write something that was not Tolkien, which is an influence of Tolkien.
Yeah, right. Well, I think, one thing I love is Isaac Asimov.
I mean, I think that Tolkien's prevalence, though, does kind of overshroud a lot of people who deserved to also be kind of seen. I think it's odd that we have this kind of very Eurocentric construction of fantasy up until fairly recently, as though it wasn't there all along, being published and written by people, just not being picked up by Americans.
Well, I think it makes sense, though. I mean, that's where it was being published. That was the majority audience. That has changed, and as that has changed, more different types of fantasy has crept into the genre. It's reflective of the audience. I mean, 40 years ago, almost all fantasy was published in Western Europe and in North America. So that's where these people are going to know their markets. I don't think it was.
I mean, that's sort of, but I mean, that's kind of like how Campbell kept an entire generation, Gate kept an entire generation of science fiction writers. I
can't argue with that.
Does that mean that that there weren't a lot more women submitting? I bet there were.
So, what are your thoughts on Asimov?
I haven't read his work in decades. I mean, I read Foundation back in the day when I was a kid, and Caves of Steel. Actually, the books he wrote that I've enjoyed more are these juveniles he wrote under the pseudonym of Paul Fringe.
Yeah, those are
the
great.
Lucky Star books. They were actually kind of more fun than I love the robotic stuff, but he plays with that in these Lucky Star books. I never met him. I got into the field after he just didn't go to cons. I think he might have actually passed away, but it is an interesting question about science fiction and fantasy. I think we're all in a conversation with each other across generations.
Mm-hmm.
Heinlein writes Starship Troopers, and then Forever War. Joe Haldeman answers it in the Forever War. you know, and two completely different views of, you know, one man coming out of World War II, another man having gone in Vietnam, and Joe still has shrapnel in his body from it.
Yeah.
Completely different. And then Scalzi comes in and he has another conversation, you know, with, and so I think we're doing that. And with Tolkien too. I mean, with fantasy, we are seeing these changes, you know, whether, you know, it's Roan Horse, or, you know, we're starting to see other, you know, answers to what has been very Western view. I mean, and even George to some degree. I mean, you know, we had a symposium about fantasy here at the house before he started Song of Ice and Fire. You know, what is it makes fantasy fantasy, and what works, what doesn't. George loves Tolkien, but he also wanted to break it a little bit. And he did. I mean, you know, and then of course everybody took the wrong lesson, which was, oh, the more violent and dark it is.
One thing I love about both fantasy and science fiction is that now you have like Evan Winter coming out with a fantasy based on African mythology. You have Eastern mythologies coming into play. It's not but it's not coming in as a replacement for classic fantasy. It's in addition to classic fantasy. It's broadening the genre, not supplanting the genre, which I think is great. The bigger the genre is, the better. I mean, you're having people who will read Rage of Dragons, but they'll also read a Tolkien book. It's not one or the other, and I think that's one of the beauties of science fiction, of fantasy, is that it can hold so much and be so inclusive if we let it. You have LGBTQ fantasy, you have all this kind of new stuff and in science fiction coming in.
But that's crazy. They do? No.
They do. Yes. Whoever this they people, you know. But you get my point. It's a growing genre that you don't have one side fighting the other side. It's just one big genre with a lot of different choices, you know. Or at least it's not being fought amongst authors. I mean, maybe some other people are fighting it. I'm not. None of the writers I know.
The Sad Puppies were fighting it, but
I was going to say
they lost pretty hard on that one.
Oh, yeah. Did you see it when they tried to mess around with Chuck Tingle?
Why though?
They nominated one of Chuck Tingle's books for a Hugo Award. So Chuck Tingle, they did not realize they had not bought sadpuppies.com. Guess who bought that? Chuck Tingle. And just messed with them relentlessly.
You're going to win, you know, okay? Just cope with it.
It's juried at the end. Right? Like,
yeah.
I finally wrote a theme song for a podcast that won an award, so that was my award.
Yay!
I take all the book contracts as awards.
I came in fourth in best writer who lives in my house, and which is odd because only 3 people live here. I know, Melinda, you won a bunch of awards, right?
I'm sorry?
You won a bunch of awards.
Me? No.
Yeah, you. If you won one, you've won more than I have.
Yeah, I kind of counted, like, mine's like 0.01 of an award. Like a very small percentage.
My claim to fame is I got nominated for a Writers Guild Award for
nice.
That was I didn't win it, but I was you know.
Yeah.
It was one of the first times a science fiction script was ever nominated. So.
Oh yeah, I'm a multi-award finalist then. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I was a top 5 finalist for Audio Book of the Year in Fantasy. Jim Butcher won. I was definitely in second place, not 5th, but second. I'm sure of that.
There you go. Again, I don't really care because I just think I am so lucky to get to be able to do this. And you know, and put my dreams out there and have people, you know, wander around my made up people, you know, in the places.
Exactly.
You know, I don't need to get an award to be really thrilled with how my life came out.
Yeah,
I just need another shot at the microphone, right?
Yeah, the award is doing this for a living because there's, I mean, if you know, I tell people all the time, if my career came to a screeching, crashing, flaming halt, I would still write. And I tell people who want to get into this, don't write for the fame or for the money. Write because this is what you love to do. Because odds are there's only 15,000 genre novelists making a living in the entire world. So odds are against you. It's not to say you shouldn't try. But if you're doing it because you want to be rich or you want to be famous, you are doing this for the wrong reasons. And you're going to
that was why I stopped talking to Webb. He took me in there, he gave me one presentation about how he was in it for the money and he was just going to aim for genre center mass and he was making all these bucks, and I was like, I can't listen to this because I actually want to break in. I don't want to hear what you're saying. I'm quite passionate. I'm done with this.
Yeah. You know, I love it. I thought it was great when he was able to quit working for NASA to go be a writer.
Whatever. Oh, he was working for a defense contractor. I don't know what he's saying there.
Oh, well.
I have firsthand evidence. I don't know when he quit from, but
well, guys, we have reached the end of the hour. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go back around in reverse order, and we're just tell people what you're up to and what you got coming up next. And I have your links to all your websites. But if you have anything else you'd like to mention where they can look you up, please do not hesitate to mention it. And we're going to go first with Ms. Melinda Snodgrass.
Hi. Well, thank you so much first for having me. This was really fun and a great conversation. I have a space opera series called Imperials. Books 1 and 2 are now available. I have my White Fang Law firm because I used to be a lawyer, and that's available. And I guess my conclusion would be, you know, people, if you want to write, because it's the one profession where nobody ever has to give you permission. You just get to do it, and it's really a wonderful thing. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and I have a cool group of people that hang out, and we talk about, I neep about dressage a whole lot, so if you like horses, come on by.
All right, Mr. Alex White.
Mixed, please, but I don't do dressage, unfortunately, but I do also do space operas. This one starts with a big ship at the edge of the universe and ends with a bad deal for the whole galaxy, or worst of all possible worlds. Sorry, bad deal is the second one. And then Alien: The Cold Forge is already out. If you want to read some Alien books by me now before hopefully I scare the crap out of you all in February. So yeah, that one's gonna be really exciting, really twisty. It'll be one for the thriller readers as well as the horror readers, I think.
Fantastic. And of course, I am Brian D. Anderson. My latest book is A Chorus of Fire, released through Tor Books, which is the sequel to The Bard's Blade. Both are available at Barnes & Noble's, Amazon, and everywhere else. I am currently working on the conclusions to 3 other series. First will be the last Goblin Chronicles series.
Wait, you said 4 earlier.
Yeah, but that's I got to work on number 3 of the Sorcerer's Song, which is the ones after this. I'm working in the last book of my Akiri series. That's the Gene Malika cover I was talking about earlier. And the last book of The Veil. And I want to thank you guys for joining me, and I had so much fun. This has been a true pleasure. So until next time, this is After the Con.